Hello, everyone, and welcome back. If you're here and you're watching this, that means I haven't scared you away yet. That's good. Or maybe I haven't done my job quite right yet then. And now we're getting to the part of the course that's much more exciting, at least for me, because you're going to be doing more writing and I'll be doing more talking. This is a class called Academic Writing, not academic talking from me. So today we're talking about the 3 C's and authorial voice. And as a reminder, we have this event coming up tomorrow. If you're interested in learning about the secrets from a couple of professors, one from the humanities, the other one from genetics, about how they write and how they produce. And that's tomorrow at 7 o'clock on YouTube. So today, we're talking about these 3 C's, which are coherence, cohesion, and clarity, what they are and why they matter, and how I like more and more of those the older I get, and how to not let your voice get lost in a text. And we'll talk about that. That's about authorial voice. Okie dokie. So we talked about last week how there are things that stick out, like this big bird in a Star Wars scene in introductions, if you don't make them clear how they connect to the rest of your ideas. And I wore a Pikachu hat to illustrate that. And you also had an exercise with a very basic story of the 3 little pigs to try to improve a text, to give it more, to remove extraneous information. And you guys all did a good job. This was the text, if you recall. I asked you to identify problems. Excuse me for a moment. I think the Carro dos Sonhos is passing by my street here, so I'm competing with more delicious things. All right. So there were 3 little pigs of different ages. There was a wolf nearby. They needed to buy a home. The first pig decided to buy a house of straw. The second built a house of sticks. Its name was Porky. The third pig took longer to build his house. His house was made of bricks. Bricks are more expensive material. A hungry wolf came to eat the pigs. The pigs hid inside their homes. The wolf easily blew down the first house. It took longer to blow down the second house, but the wolf did it. The third house was made of bricks. It was impossible to blow down. All of you are familiar with this story, and so you know how the story is supposed to go together. But this version of the story is very choppy. There seems to be information that isn't obviously connected to other parts. And importantly, there seems to be information that doesn't seem to really matter in terms of the story being told. So you guys were able to identify that in your introductions, in your revisions. And one of the things that stood out was ages. Why have this word here, ages? If you know the story, you know that age doesn't necessarily have any relevance to the plot. So you recognize that, and you also recognize this name. So either some of you said this name is irrelevant, or others mentioned that, well, if you mention Porky, why not give the other pigs names too? And if so, then there must be some reason for it. But anyway, to have one name, Porky, in the middle of the story seemed odd, like that big bird in the Star Wars scene, or like me wearing a Pikachu hat. Then some of you pointed out how you have this apparently out of nowhere. Bricks are a more expensive material. Okay, it's not connected to it's not grammatically connected to the sentence that comes before it. It doesn't seem to be connected to the sentence that comes after it. What does cost have to do with this? And it's not obvious. Then you have other information that may seem to be, some of you mentioned, seem to be out of order. So you have a mention of a wolf here without a connection of why that's relevant, because you start with the pigs, then you go to a wolf, and then you go back to this. But they, we know, refers to pigs, but it's the sentence, the first sentence, not the one before it. Okay. And then you have the wolf. a hungry wolf came to eat the pigs. Now, one of the problems, as we'll see later in today's class, is this word but these two animals are the same. It's the same wolf. So it's odd that this particular formulation, this particular organization of the text is strange. So here are some alternative examples. Here you have a student who got into the creative storytelling groove and said, once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs that needed to build a home because there was a wolf nearby. Well, here you have, it sounds much better because it's not just a sentence about the wolf being disconnected from all of that. You have the person connecting the first, the second, and the third sentence all in one. Okay. So that was the original sentence, and here you can see the one that they created flows much more nicely. Once upon a time, there were 3 little pigs that needed to build a home because there was a wolf nearby. Here you can see that the student took what were 3 sentences. There were 3 little pigs of different ages. There was a wolf nearby. They needed to build a home. The first pig needed to build a home. That was 3 sentences, and they made it 1. They got rid of this. They got rid of the ages comment, and it flows much better, even with adding once upon a time as a kind of fun tool. There were 3 little pigs that needed to build a home because there was a wolf nearby. And as you can see, there are just 2 little words here that make that flow much better and make a big difference. And that's going to be a theme that's going to come up again a few times in today's class, is how small words can make a big difference in making your text read better. Okay, so those little spaces there are filled with 2 little words. There were 3 little pigs that needed to build a home because there was a wolf nearby. That's it. Makes a big difference. Also, the porky thing is gone in this version, and they take out also this part here about the cost of material, judging it as being irrelevant. So instead, the new version is the 3rd pig here. The 3rd pig took longer to build his house and made it of bricks, a stronger material. And again, connecting the sentences there, where you have bricks and longer, and then information that was missing in the first one. That makes it flow better. And then here in the original version, you have the 3rd house was made of bricks, and then a break. It was impossible to blow down. Here, we're just a very small little word, this as. It connects everything. It connects it nicely. But as the 3rd house was made of bricks, it was impossible to blow down. One little small word making a big difference. And then you have this with the wolf, as I mentioned, as being odd. And so what this student did was made this the hungry wolf, and that made a difference because we know it's the same wolf. And here you have the wolf easily blew down the first house as the original version. So you have the pigs hid inside their homes, break. The wolf easily blew down the first house, break. It took longer to blow down the second house. In the new version, this revised version, you have, again, a small little word, as the first house was made of straw, the wolf easily blew it down. So nice little reorganization, showing cause and effect, small word making a big difference. The original version was the 3rd house was made of bricks, break, it was impossible to blow down. Here, look at this. The 3rd house, and then I'll let you try to guess what the word is here, was made of bricks. And then another word that I'll let you guess, it was impossible to break down. So with the 3rd house, and you can expect some kind of word that would show a contrasting point was made of bricks, and then something that would show a consequence. So that's it. The third house, however, was made of bricks, so it was impossible to break down, to blow down. Very simple. You could also have, therefore it was impossible, or hence it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you have those words in there. One thing I'd like to mention about these little words here, these small words that make a big difference. Many of you, if not most of you, have seen these words before, and probably have learned them in the context of how they are useful for writing academic language. That somehow, if you add a little spice of however and therefore in your text, it sounds more academic. In reality, it's kind of interesting that some research has been conducted to compare the use of these words. These are connecting adverbs, basically. These words like however and therefore and so on. The use of these words among native speakers compared with non-native speakers. And many people would guess that native speakers, native academic writers use these more often. In reality, research shows that non-native writers use these connective devices more frequently, I think because they're trained to use them in academic writing. And that doesn't necessarily make their writing any better or any worse than the native writing. It just goes to show that that is not a characteristic per se of academic writing. In other words, using these words like however and therefore doesn't make your text more academic. These words exist because of the need that one feels as a writer to connect the discourse. So the connections aren't something that you should put in. The connections is something that, an instinct that you have, that you say, okay, I need to connect these ideas, and therefore I'll put in these words to signal that connection. Okay. So this is all about what we've seen here. Exemplifies improvements in what's called coherence, cohesion, and clarity. Coherence is simply how do the ideas connect in a text. And cohesion is, do they make sense? And cohesion is how do the words one uses to make those connections. There are many ways of doing that in a text. And clarity is, have you supplied the right information? Not too much, not too little, concise enough to not confuse, not a sentence that is a whole page long. And this idea of coherence is something that takes practice, but one of the things to improve all of these things, really, the 3 C's, the coherence, the cohesion, the clarity, is going back to your text and revising. There's an old expression which is good writing is rewriting, and that's going to be an important part of your next assignment. Is going back to your text, sending it for somebody else to look at, and revising it. And as we'll see, it's not so easy to do if you've spent so much time thinking about your research in other ways, like how to set up your methodology and thinking about your results and showing your statistics and so on, to think about how to present your ideas in a text. So to recap, coherence is, does one idea logically connect to the previous and subsequent ones? To kind of illustrate that, I can give you a couple of anecdotes of how, if one is unfamiliar with a situation, or in my case, language, how coherence can be difficult. So when I first started learning Portuguese, I heard a couple of strange things that seemed strange to me because they lacked coherence. But to the speaker, they totally were coherent. So for example, I did not understand when sometimes if I closed somebody's car door, that the driver of the car would ask me in Brazil, would ask me, do you have a refrigerator at home? It seemed to be totally out of nowhere. Of course, to the driver, it made a lot of sense, but to me, it totally lacked coherence. What does me having a refrigerator at home have to do with me closing the door of the car? Of course, now I understand. Another time that I can remember to exemplify coherence is one time I telephoned somebody, and then the person said in Portuguese, Ron, você não morre mais, which I understood as you won't die anymore. And I thought, well, that's great. Now I know that that is something that someone says when you were either just talking about the person or thinking about the person. I suppose, I don't know, I don't really use that expression. But at the time, it completely lacked coherence. And now I understand that it does cohere to at least the speaker. So those are examples of what coherence means. And then cohesion is the words that we use. Here I have an example of so and however, as we saw in the Three Little Pigs example. But it also can be, like we saw in the Three Little Pigs example, a wolf versus the wolf. The wolf meaning we already know which wolf we are referring to. It can also mean using the same words that we used before to refer to the same idea or concept. There are many ways that a text can cohere, and these words here are the typical examples. And then clarity is, as I said, simply the idea, or kind of vague idea, is that if there is insufficient or extraneous information present, and these things are all related, the coherence, cohesion, and clarity, because as an example, it may be that mentioning Porky's name in the Three Little Pigs story actually is relevant, but the way it was extraneous. Or maybe the cost of the brick was perhaps, you could make it as a relevant part of the story, but the way it appears in the story seems irrelevant. And so therefore it seems extraneous, therefore lacks coherence. And so these are three very important concepts that one needs to keep in mind, and you will keep in mind as you write and when you give feedback to others starting this week. Here is one to recap an example I showed you earlier in this term. The two statements, very simple statements. I live in Curitiba, I have many umbrellas. Makes a lot of sense, probably. One can infer the relationship between these two if one is from Curitiba or has some experience of living in Curitiba. Not these days with how dry it's been. But for anybody who's not familiar with that, with the fact that it rains a lot in Curitiba, this doesn't really cohere very well. There's lacking some information. So if you added something like, I live in Curitiba, comma, where it rains a lot, comma, therefore, comma, I have many umbrellas, that would make a lot more sense and it would be clearer. But that's information that one keeps in one's head. And if it seems obvious to one might not remember to put that in the text or in the discourse. And that's what happens when you try to stuff all of your literature review from your dissertation or your thesis into an article where you have to kind of get to the main points, where there are many points that won't seem obvious. And also simply that, as I've said before a few times, that if you spend so long thinking, eating, breathing, swimming in your research, 2, 3, 4 or more years, then things that may seem obvious to you aren't obvious to another person. Important points that connect obviously in your head may not be so obvious to someone else that you're talking to. There's this text from a real manuscript that I received to review, and as you can see in this this passage here, it's divided into, I believe, 3 sentences. So that's 1, 3 sentences. You're going to have a task to try to make this 1 sentence. This is not for now. This will be part of your homework. And one of the things that stands out, and I'm kind of giving you a hint about how to do this for your homework, it's a very simple homework task, is that this sentence here stands out as odd. So just to quickly read it, in 2011, following a major curricular discussion, the University of Tijuana community recognized the need to solve the problem of low achievement standards in English language. This situation was later reported in empirical research by Fulano in 2014. Here, the information doesn't necessarily seem extraneous. There's something else going on here. It's kind of along those same lines. But what's odd here is the question that arises in my mind is, why is this author giving so much importance to Fulano here, to give Fulano an entire sentence in this paragraph? And this speaks to a problem that I see many times in academic discourse of less experienced authors. And so that leads me to this next point, is how to not let your voice as an author get lost in a crowd. How to make your voice cleared so that you can be identified as who's actually doing the talking here. And why should we listen to you? How to let your voice be heard above the noise, in this case, the territory that they say that you are presenting. How to do that. How to shine a light on you as a speaker. So I'm going to show you a quick text, and as I show it to you, I want you to think, is it clear what the I say is? Remember the concept of they say versus I say? Well, as you read this, you tell me what you think. I'll read it together with you. Dearden 2014 has asserted that English as a medium of instruction is a growing global phenomenon. Ernesto Macaro 2018 showed that EMI has not yet been widely studied in the discipline of applied linguistics. In fact, in his book, he reports finding a total 16 published studies on EMI before the year 2000. ERI 2016 has stated that little is understood about EMI and other related English teaching scenarios such as content and language integrated learning and English for academic purposes. All right, for those of you watching this who are experienced writers or experienced editors or both, reviewers of manuscripts, you will probably recognize this as a common problem. Those of you who are still not that experienced in academic writing, especially if you're sort of master's level student, you may not recognize this yet. In fact, you probably even produced discourse that sounds like this. And if you'll notice, what does every sentence here start with? Every sentence here starts with another guy, starts with another person. And what is happening here is a student is giving the spotlight not to what the author is saying, not what her or his position is, not her or his academic voice. The spotlight is going to what the other people are saying. This is not they say, I say. This is more like he said, she said. And this phenomenon happens, I think, for a lot of different reasons. First of all, as we've said before, one has to remember that you are entering a conversation. You're not spying on a conversation. You're not eavesdropping on a conversation. You are entering a conversation. In fact, in your introduction, and arguably also later on in a discussion section of your article, you are entering that conversation as a participant in it, and arguably at the center of it, really. So even though you need to start with what others are saying, that doesn't mean you only report. This is not reportage. This is you sewing in to your own ideas what other people have thought and said. Castenav in 2003 talks about her experience with learning to become an academic writer. And it's worth looking at a few of the points that she makes. She says, if I wished to contribute to knowledge in my field, I needed to see my published writing as part of ongoing conversations with published writers. So she was developing this awareness of that her writing was actually part of an ongoing conversation with published writers. And said, I needed to situate my work in relation to other published voices. So this is something that I see is something that is an aspect of developing one's ability to write academically that doesn't come very naturally, especially if you're kind of new to postgraduate work. Because to be honest, students have spent, in many cases, the vast majority of their academic careers through kindergarten all the way to high school through to the end of their undergraduate degree, mostly being consumers of research, being consumers of published voices. And all of a sudden, they get to the master's level, the doctoral level especially, and they're being asked to actually be contributors, to contribute to knowledge in their field, and situate their work in relation. So where there was an asymmetrical relationship, all of a sudden they're being asked to have a more of a symmetrical relationship. And that doesn't come naturally. And unfortunately, I think a lot of postgraduate education doesn't do a lot to help that process. They just kind of say, by magic, you will automatically become an academic writer, and it doesn't really happen that way. And a lot of students, unfortunately, feel this guilt that, and we talked about this in the first and second weeks, this kind of imposter syndrome, this guilt that, oh no, I don't know how to write, I don't know how to do this. Well, don't beat yourself up. You're not alone. It's not something like you snap your fingers and you develop this. And this work here by Kasanav, she talks about that how her journey began with trying to understand what her role was in talking about her work. And so she says, I consider this goal of situating my work in relation to what others have said to be the single most challenging and important aspect of learning to write for publication. And that's a very bold statement, but I believe it's very true, and I think I can identify with that this was a challenge to me too when I was learning to write for publication. And going on to other aspects of what she says in this regard, she says, I did not understand this notion of academic conversations via publications for much of my graduate school time. Remember, graduate school in the North American context is postgraduate. I did not know what it meant to be scholarly, but I knew I had to refer to work that had already been published, right? And this part here, you can relate to, you can relate to this. A lot of people feel that, okay, I have to do this. This is part of what I know I have to do. She said, I knew I had to refer to work that had already been published and that the authorities had to be cited somewhere early in the paper. There also had to be enough citations, and I find this to be funny as well, to give the reader the sense that I knew something. And this is the funniest part to me. I used to count the number of references in the reference list. I felt satisfied if I could reach the arbitrary number of 15. And many of you, especially if you are a professor watching this now, I'm sure you can relate to this. The questions that sometimes students ask, like, okay, professor, how many references should I have? And it's a question that really bothers me, but I understand it because their entire academic life, they've been told what to do, and thinking about assessment as, okay, what is enough for me to pass, or what I need to get an A, or not, okay, well, how many references do I need myself to make my position clear, or how many voices do I want to bring in to further my argument? So this authorial voice really is not something that you can just snap your fingers and it happens. It's something that arises out of a feeling of being a membership of your discourse community, your community of practice. So it arises out of community membership. And if you don't feel as a member of a community, then obviously it's not natural for you to have this authorial voice. But here, I'm going to talk about some ways that you can identify if you are falling into the trap of not making your voice clear. And it goes back to this. If you notice in your introduction that you are beginning your sentences reporting what other people have done, that is a sign that you are giving too much stage to other people's work and not talking about what your voice is. It's all that they say and very little of the I say. And this could be, this is one way of citation with the name and the year, but the same thing applies if you put numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, as some conventions prescribe. So look at the difference if I do this. It now goes without saying that English as a medium instruction in higher education, where English is not the usual language of instruction, is a widespread and global phenomenon. Look what I've done here. I've put Dearden, I've kept Dearden in there, and I've added another name, as these are the people who have thought about this before. Simply that. I'm making this my statement. This is me saying this, not just Dearden, not Dearden saying this. This is me. I'm saying this is my position. This is my voice. And these are other people who would voice or have voiced similar things. All right, in the second sentence with Ernesto Maccaro here, again, he goes last and in between parentheses here. He was there as the beginning of the sentence, and here I've changed it. At the same time, as an object of research within applied linguistics, EMI can be considered a more recent undertaking, with Ernesto Maccaro in his 2018 volume on EMI reporting only 16 published studies specifically on EMI before 2000, noting a lack of even a mention of EMI in the pre-21st century reviews of content-based instruction. And if you'll notice, I also link this to my original sentence. So I'm adding my voice here. It goes without saying. I'm making a speech. I'm not just reporting. I'm making a point. Here's my point. It goes without saying that EMI is widespread and a global phenomenon. That's the claiming of centrality. And then I said a contrasting point at the same time. And so I'm linked, this part here is part of my speech. I'm not reporting, I am making a speech here. At the same time, as an object of research in applied linguistics, blah, blah, blah. And although I do highlight Ernesto Maccaro's work, but it's part of the main point that I'm making, not because I'm reporting what he said. And then the original version after that was, Airy has stated that little is understood about EMI, but here I haven't really made the connection of what this is to the rest. So instead, with one little word making a big difference, I link it to this. With indeed, so adding to this point, signaling I'm adding to this point, there is still much to be understood about EMI and how it relates to other widely studied and established research concerns in applied linguistics, blah, 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 CLIL, EAP, and even English for specific purposes, Airy 2016. So this is my voice now. This whole thing here is now me making a point. with those things in bold, that's especially my voice coming out, and those other sources are there to, as citing, yes, these are other people who have said this. This is not just my ideas. Otherwise, it would just be plagiarism. If it wasn't plagiarism, it'd be weakening my point because I'm not citing sources. But I'm making a point. And those points are being sewn together by these things in bold. There is my voice right there. There's the author's voice, there's the author's voice, there's the author's voice. I'm putting myself in the center of that conversation, making a point, bringing in the other authors, but me, the I say, is the central point. All right. So I asked you to do this, fill out this form. If you haven't done it already, you better do it now, ASAP, which is a way to organize your ideas. And I'm going to leave this for a second. I'm going to go over to that form. And so, if you recall, the form has kind of a contextualization, why this is important, and getting you to think about claiming your centrality and your territory and your niche, occupying your niche, so moves 1, 2, and 3. Well, now I want you to go back to this because you have access to your answers. I want you to go back to this form, and I want you to think about the points that I've made today about coherence, cohesion, and clarity, and also your own voice, to put together a draft introduction which you're going to submit. And so let me show you what I'm going to ask you to do. In your Moodle, this is the module for today. The 3 C's and authorial voice. And there's a video here to show you how to take those ideas from that juicer form and put them in your draft introduction. And your draft introduction looks like this. So there's a link there in Moodle. Whoops. There is a link, believe me, there is a link there. Here. And in this link, you're going to download it. So you're just going to go to, this link, and you'll click download or buy shot, whatever it is there. And you'll put your name and the program that you're in and the institution. And then I want you to add a contextualization. So some of the contextualization that you've already put in your juicer form, you'll put here. This here you won't write in because this will be for your feedback partner to write in. And then you'll put your title from your juicer form or whatever in here. And then you'll copy and paste in there as well. All of the instructions about how to transfer from the form, the juicer ideas juicer form to this is here in Moodle. But you'll also see that there is a special task here called First Draft Introduction Peer Review. All you have to do is click on that and follow the instructions. After you have completed this form and you've put in your introduction here, just copy and paste basically from your juicer form, then you're going to submit it here. You're going to upload it here. By clicking on this button here. And as you'll see, we're in a submission phase now. This is the current phase. And you will have to submit that to the system, the Moodle system, by July 30th. And that means you have exactly 7 days to do that. Again, if you use your Juicer, Ideas Juicer Google form, the text from there, transfer it over to that other doc that I just showed you. You're pretty much 80 to 90% there already. Then you just have to submit it. After you submit it, you don't have to do anything until July 30th. On July 30th, at exactly 3:31 p.m., this will switch from the submission phase to the assessment phase. And what's going to happen then? You will receive 2 introductions from somebody else. It's a random assignment. You don't know who you're going to get. It's like a box of chocolates, an academic box of chocolates. You'll receive two introductions only from other people, and you will have in this system a kind of rubric, instructions about criteria to assess those introductions, and that you will do by August 6th, 3:30 p.m. All right, so I want to make a couple of points about the submission process. So now you are going to be able to show your work finally to other people using this form, as I mentioned. Please don't submit a novel. Please only submit your introduction, and please no longer than 1,000 words. That means in practice, you're looking at a maximum of 2 pages, double spaced or 1.5 spaced. And I've seen introductions, really good introductions that are half a page long. So it's not about quantity, it's about quality. Also remember that this is a draft. A draft is what you call in Portuguese a rascunho. In other words, don't be too fussy about worrying about, oh no, I haven't crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. Right now, it's about larger issues. So I'm not going to ask anybody to please do not comment too much on people's language, grammar and stuff. You're going to be focusing on more macro issues. Along the same lines, if you want to submit your introduction in Portuguese, or I would say either English or Portuguese, because Spanish might be a bit of a reach, or other language might be a bit of a reach for other people. But let's say Portuguese and English, I think either of those is fine, because right now, as I've said before, my main interest is in you being able to get your ideas flowing, organizing larger issues, not focusing on minor ones. If writing English doesn't come naturally to you, if you feel it's a barrier, that might also make your writing more cumbersome than it should be. Writing in a genre, the academic research article genre, which is already cumbersome enough to a lot of people who have never written in it before, or don't have a lot of experience in it, much less writing in a language that's not their own. So if you want to venture into English because you feel confident enough, super, that's great. If not, do feel free to submit it in another language. That's not Portuguese, I suppose. That's not really what the main point of this is right now. I'm worried more about, can you show me, can you show your peers that you can structure your introduction in a way that's logical and shows what your contribution is. You should be submitting your introduction no later than July 30th, as I mentioned. So this means that you cannot submit late assignments. The reason for this is not because I'm being mean or inflexible or intransigent. It's because this system now is on autopilot. It will automatically go from the submission stage to the assessment stage in the assignment on July 30th at 3:31 p.m. If you have not submitted by then, that means you will not go into the process of revision, and that means you will lose the entire, you'll lose 30% at least of your grade, or you may not even have your introduction considered, depending on the circumstances. So this is out of my hands now, basically. Moodle has taken over. If you do not submit by that time on this date, then you will not be able to proceed to the rest of the assignment. Right. Moving on. A few tips to pass on to you about writing assignment. Now, this writing of your first draft. Again, this is a first draft. This is not your final draft. This is something that is just to get something on paper, get your ideas out. Remember that small words can make a big difference. This is a point that I've made in today's class a number of times, and I'm stressing it again now. So look at this introduction. This points out a small problem that, apparently a small problem that can become a big one. In this introduction, in recent years, studies are searching for green solvents that can be replaced by organic media, have inherent toxicity and high volatility. The green technology reduces the use of hazardous media by offering new environmentally and by controlling physical properties of media such as temperature and pressure and developing new green solvents. All right, there are a number of issues here, but one of the ones that kind of sticks out as being particularly weird to me comes from this word here, the. If you remember, I mentioned the before in the Three Little Pigs story as being problematic. And here you see it on a more sophisticated level, but causing a similar problem. Because the word the in English has an anaphoric power. It sends a message that to the reader that you are referring to something that was mentioned before. If you translate this in your head to a different language, in this case Portuguese, which is the first language of the writer, the definite article can be used to talk about general phenomena, and that doesn't apply in English. And these little words in a genre where being precise in the information you're trying to transmit can be foiled by these little words. So we saw with the Little Pig story that you have and then when it should have been the, but you also have the definite article can be a problem if you overuse it or use it in the wrong way. So look at these two sentences that appear to be almost the same. In fact, they've been numbered the same in the wrong way. So this should be number 2. First one, new low emissions buses have been implemented in California. Green technology is growing in that state. Okay. And number 2, new low emissions buses have been implemented in California. The green technology is growing in that state. One little word makes a huge difference in the meaning here. The first one means basically all green technology. Green technology as a general thing. The second one is the mistake. It's not a mistake, but it's when it shows an example of how the word the can have a big power. Where the green technology refers back to this specific thing. And so if you are a writer, if you're a speaker of Portuguese, for example, where this word the doesn't really make much difference, then you can see how if you misused it here, if somebody who was a speaker of Portuguese, wrote this, number 2, but thinking that they want to mean number 1, how the meaning would change drastically, where they're actually referring to only buses, when in fact, maybe in their heads, they wanted to refer to the phenomenon as a whole. One little word makes a big difference. And I'm gonna show you how you can prevent that in a minute. Here's another example. This is molar incisor hypomineralization and associated factors, a case control study in Brazilian children at a public university. And the whole thing begins with a the. And so when I first read this, I thought, oops, is there a paragraph that's missing before that? Because it seems that they're referring to a specific hypomineralization. Oh, I see, there's a mistake in the title. So there's, I didn't understand what they're referring to, a specific hypomineralization in the first sentence because of that word the. Of course, if you read on, you begin to understand it, but you don't want to cause this kind of difficult and cumbersome reading to a reviewer of your article. One good site for all these small words, you remember, is OneLook. So if you want to find a synonym for things like therefore and so, you can look at that website again, just as a reminder to you, where you can find synonyms for the ideas that you want to express, these connecting words. I also recommend you going back to the corpus, or the corpora that you created using antconc to see how these words are used. So for example, a lot of people think that therefore is always at the beginning of a sentence, but if you look at examples of it, you see that rather the word therefore collocates very frequently with the word and so in a sentence, the most common way of formulating this is and therefore. And this is actually kind of simple but important because you can see how the ideas get connected with this very simple combination of words. And then finally, the last tip I want to show you, and this goes back to that, how to avoid issues like with the word the, such a small word, potentially causing confusion. A lot of people don't know that Google Docs comes with a grammar corrector in it. It's kind of a newish feature, I suppose. And so let me show you what I mean. So if you open a Google Doc, you could copy and paste what you've written in there, or you can just write on there if you want. And I'm gonna write a sentence that has mistakes in it. For example, in my opinion, most important in the life is the love. And what you see here is mistakes with definite articles, like I showed you with the hypomineralization or the wolf, the green technology. Here you have 2 mistakes. And what you notice is you have like 2 little squiggly lines, or 3 squiggly lines here that automatically show me that there's a mistake here. So if you set your language preference to English in Google Doc, it will automatically detect some useful things. So here, if I click on this, it corrects me in the right way, which is, it shouldn't be the most important, it should be the most important thing. And now it's correct. It shouldn't be the life, it should be in life, not the life. And it shouldn't be the love, it should be is love. And that sounds much better. Even lexically, I wrote here, in my opinion, the most important thing in life is love, but would be nice in a greater salary in my job. Well, here it corrects the grammar, it would, and it sees that that's wrong here to win. But it should be earn. And so this is a simple way to just double check minor grammatical issues. I've also talked about Grammarly as being an option as well. But if you just want to have a double check, this is one way you can do it as well. So that's it. On Moodle, you have all the instructions, hopefully, that you need to submit the assignment. And now you just kind of keep calm and write your introduction. Don't be freaked out about it. This is a good thing, and you're going to be all right, I promise. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties at the beginning of this, but since this was recorded, if you missed anything, hopefully everything that I've said has been registered somewhere. And I wish you luck, and I'll see you next week.